All right, buckle up, folks, because we're about to take a roller coaster ride through the rise and fall of the internet's very own animated chaos factory, Eddsworld. Yes, you heard that right. Eddsworld, the series that gave us everything from sentient cola cans to spacefaring idiots, and somewhere along the way, managed to sneak into our hearts like a ninja with a really goofy sense of humor. But wait, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's get one thing straight. This isn't your typical YouTube sob story. Oh no, my friends. This is the tale of how a bunch of poorly drawn stick figures on flash animations somehow became the internet's crown jewel. And then, brace yourselves, how it all went spiraling down faster than you can say Santa Claus. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Mostly. So let's rewind a bit. Picture it. The early 2000s, back when the internet was still figuring out what it wanted to be when it grew up. And boom, here comes this quirky little series called Eddsworld, like a caffeine-fueled fever dream on a Windows XP screen. It was funny, it was weird, it was exactly what the internet needed. A little dose of insanity wrapped in a package of British humor so dry you could use it to mop up spilled tea. Now, here's the kicker. Eddsworld wasn't just a web series. No, it was more like a cult. A digital cult with fans so dedicated they could probably form a small country if they all decided to move to the same island. And why wouldn't they? Ed, Tom, Matt, and Tord were like the Beatles of animation. If the Beatles spent most of their time fighting zombies and getting blown up in increasingly ridiculous ways, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? But let's not get too nostalgic, because here comes the twist. The part where things start to get complicated. See, the creator, Ed Gould, was like the mad genius behind it all, the guy with the golden touch. And when he tragically passed away in 2012, it was like the internet lost one of its brightest stars. But here's where things get even weirder. Instead of letting the show end on a high note, like that one party you remember fondly because it didn't drag on too long, they decided to keep it going. And boy, did things get interesting. Tom Ridgewell, also known as Tomska, stepped in to carry the torch. Because apparently, juggling a massively successful YouTube channel and the emotional weight of continuing your dead friend's legacy is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And at first, it was all good. The episodes were still funny, the fans were still happy. But then, slowly but surely, something started to feel off. It was like watching your favorite band after they've replaced their lead singer. Sure, the music's still good, but it's just not the same. Suddenly, the episodes weren't just about random adventures anymore. There was this weird pressure to make them bigger, better, more epic, like they had to prove something. And let's be honest, nothing kills the vibe of a goofy comedy series faster than trying to make it deep and meaningful. It's like trying to serve caviar at a pizza party. No one asked for it, and no one's impressed. But it wasn't just the content that was changing, the fan base was too. Oh, the fan base. They went from being the supportive, we're all in this together crowd to a bunch of hypercritical nitpickers dissecting every frame like they were writing their PhD on animated web series. And can you blame them? They were watching their beloved Eddsworld transform into something they didn't quite recognize. It was like watching your childhood treehouse get turned into a luxury condo. You can't help but feel a little betrayed. And then came the Kickstarter campaign. Oh yes, the glorious Kickstarter, where dreams go to die and promises are made to be broken. The Legacy season was supposed to be the grand revival, the comeback of the century. Instead, it felt more like a band trying to recapture their early hits by playing the same old songs with a slightly different beat. Sure, it was polished, but it was also kind of soulless. Like they were going through the motions because they had to, not because they wanted to. And the fans, they were like, wait, we paid for this? The episodes started to feel less like the quirky Eddsworld everyone fell in love with, and more like a bloated, overproduced version that had lost its way. And don't even get me started on the internal drama, because what's a downfall story without a little behind-the-scenes chaos, right? Creative differences, production delays, fan expectations. It was like a recipe for disaster cooked up in a pressure cooker with the lid about to blow. So here we are, at the end of our little tale. A story of a world that once shone so bright, only to dim under the weight of its own legacy. So without further ado, let's deep dive into the things that I find quite weird in the latest episodes of Eddsworld. Number 1. Forced humor. So, forced humor is basically when jokes are pushed so hard, they might as well be auditioning for a role in a slapstick comedy. Remember the golden days of Eddsworld? You had clever gags, quick-witted banter, and a sense of fun that felt natural. But nowadays, it's like they're using a comedy manual written by someone who's never actually heard a joke. It's like they're trying to get you to laugh by sheer force of will, kind of like someone shouting, "Laugh, laugh, laugh," at you while they juggle flaming swords. Let's talk specifics. One classic example of this forced humor is the infamous Santa Claus character. Oh yes, the jolly, over-the-top Santa gone rogue. Originally, Santa was this quirky, outlandish villain that made you chuckle because of how absurd he was. But fast forward to the latest episodes, and it's like they're trying to make Santa this epic, laugh-out-loud figure by throwing in every joke in the book, whether it fits or not. It's like they took a good joke, added a few more layers, and turned it into a big bloated mess that's less funny and more weight. Are they still going? Then there's the overuse of running gags. Running gags are great when done right. Just look at classics like the "I'm not dead yet" bit from Monty Python. But Eddsworld has taken this to a whole new level. Remember when the running gag was a simple, funny thing that made you smile every time it came around? Now it's like they're hammering these gags into the ground until they've lost all their original charm. It's as if they're afraid you might forget the joke, so they make sure you get hit over the head with it repeatedly. It's kind of like being stuck in an endless loop where the joke just won't stop, no matter how much you wish it would. And let's not overlook the forced character quirks. Characters that were once delightfully unique now seem to be stuck in a rut of trying too hard. Ed's clumsy moments used to be funny because they were unexpected and relatable. Now it feels like they're inserting these moments into every episode, hoping that the sheer volume of pratfalls and accidents will somehow equate to humor. It's like they've got a clumsy Ed button they press every few minutes, hoping it'll bring the laughs, even if it's getting a little old. Finally, there's the increasingly bizarre humor shifts. It's as if the show's trying to reinvent itself by throwing in every weird and wacky idea they can think of. The result? Jokes that feel out of place, like someone trying to tell a joke about quantum physics at a children's birthday party. It's not that the jokes are bad per se, but when they come out of nowhere and don't quite fit with the tone of the show, they just end up feeling awkward and forced. In essence, the humor in Eddsworld has become a bit like a fireworks display gone wrong. Lots of noise, some flashy lights, but not much of the original sparkle. It's like the show's trying so hard to be funny that it's lost sight of what made it genuinely entertaining in the first place. So next time you're watching and find yourself squirming at an overextended gag or a character quirk that's overstayed its welcome, remember, you're not alone. Number 2, inconsistent quality. All right, let's tackle the next big issue, inconsistent quality. This is where things get a bit like ordering a mystery box online. You never quite know what you're going to get, and sometimes it's a delightful surprise, while other times it's a giant disappointment wrapped in a dubious package. So what exactly do we mean by inconsistent quality? Picture this. You're watching Eddsworld, and you get an episode that's so well crafted, so hilariously on point, that it feels like they've hit the jackpot. It's like the comedy gods have aligned, and everything just works. Then next thing you know, you're hit with an episode that's so off-mark, you're left wondering if someone switched the script with a random page from a notebook. Let's dive into some prime examples. Remember The End, an episode that for a lot of fans was like a masterclass in Eddsworld brilliance? The pacing was tight, the humor was on point, and the whole thing was wrapped up in a delightful bow of chaos that left you craving more. It was like the show's finest hour, where everything just clicked and made you remember why you loved Eddsworld in the first place. Now let's contrast that with an episode like The TV. Oh boy, where do we even start? This one is infamous among fans for its bizarre plot twists and pacing that feels like it's been thrown into a blender. It's almost as if they took a perfectly good episode and decided to sprinkle in a few too many weird ideas, just to see what would happen. The result? a disjointed mess that makes you wish you could hit the rewind button and go back to the days when the show's plots were simpler and a whole lot more enjoyable. And then there's Eddsworld versus the World. Remember that one? It promised a big showdown and epic stakes. But what we got was a jumbled mess of over-the-top gags and confusing storylines. Instead of a climactic adventure, it felt like a series of disjointed skits strung together, lacking the coherent charm that fans had come to expect. It's like they had a great idea, but then decided to throw it all out the window in favor of a chaotic jumble that left you scratching your head. Oh, and let's not forget the misadventures of Eddsworld. It's almost like they threw everything but the kitchen sink into this one. You've got a mishmash of jokes, scenarios, and character antics that feel like they're fighting for attention, with no clear direction or purpose. It's the kind of episode where you can almost hear the writers shouting, "Look at all the funny stuff we've crammed in." But instead of coming together as a cohesive whole, it just ends up feeling like a cluttered mess. Inconsistent quality in Eddsworld isn't just about having a few off episodes. It's about the show sometimes hitting it out of the park and other times missing the mark entirely. It's like watching a roller coaster that's got more ups and downs than a soap opera plot. One minute you're on a high, laughing your head off, and the next, you're wondering if the show's creators even remember what made Eddsworld so great in the first place. Number 3, character degradation. All right, let's shift gears and talk about character degradation. This is where Eddsworld has taken a turn from lovable goofballs to, well, characters who feel like they're stuck in a never-ending loop of their own quirks. It's like watching your favorite band turn into a cover band that plays their greatest hits, but can't quite hit the right notes anymore. So, what do we mean by character degradation? Imagine Ed, Tom, Matt, and Tord as the fantastic foursome who used to bring joy and hilarity to every episode. They were like that crazy group of friends who were always up for a wild time and made you laugh no matter what. But now, they've turned into these exaggerated versions of their former selves, as if someone pumped them full of quirkiness steroids and then just let them run wild. Let's start with Ed. Remember when Ed was the lovable, slightly bumbling everyman who got himself into ridiculous situations, but somehow made it all endearing? Now it feels like Ed's entire personality has been reduced to a series of clumsy mishaps and overly dramatic reactions. It's like they took his original charm and cranked it up to 11, leaving us with a character who's less relatable and more of a walking punchline. Instead of being the grounded core of the show, he's become this over-the-top caricature of himself, making it hard to connect with the character who used to be so effortlessly likable. And then there's Tom. Tom, the cynical, sarcastic one who provided a perfect counterbalance to Ed's enthusiasm. He used to be the guy who'd roll his eyes and give that perfect deadpan response that made you snort with laughter. Now, Tom feels like he's stuck in a perpetual state of, "Look at me, I'm so edgy and sarcastic," with his humor starting to feel more like a broken record than a fresh take. It's like he's been trapped in a sarcastic loop where every line is meant to be funny but ends up feeling repetitive and forced. Matt, the guy who was all about being the fun-loving, occasionally clueless buddy, has turned into this exaggerated version of his former self. Instead of his quirks being endearing, they now seem like they've been magnified to the point of absurdity. It's like they took his clueless trait and decided to turn it into a full-blown character flaw, where every episode seems to push his ineptitude further and further. It's a bit like having a friend who used to be charmingly forgetful but is now just annoyingly unreliable. And then there's Tord, who has gone from being a somewhat mysterious and intriguing character to a caricature of an over-the-top villain. His role has shifted so much that it feels like they're trying to force him into a mold that doesn't quite fit. It's like they decided, "Hey, let's make Tord the most ridiculous antagonist ever," without realizing that it's turned him from a complex character into a one-dimensional figure that's hard to take seriously. In essence, the character degradation in Eddsworld is like watching your favorite band members get replaced by lookalikes. All right, folks, let's wrap this up with a neat little bow, or more accurately, a crumpled napkin tossed onto a messy table. We've journeyed through the highs and lows of Eddsworld, unpacking the forced humor, inconsistent quality, and the character degradation that's made us all scratch our heads and wonder what went wrong. So what's the verdict? Eddsworld, once the crown jewel of animated chaos, has had its fair share of stumbles. It's like watching a beloved band go from chart-topping hits to trying out some experimental sound that, well, let's just say it's not everyone's cup of tea. The jokes that used to hit home now feel like they're missing the mark. The characters who were once our animated buddies have turned into overstretched versions of themselves, and the overall quality has become a roller coaster ride of, is this going to be amazing or just meh? But hey, don't get me wrong, Eddsworld still has its moments. It's like that one friend who's not always on point but every now and then cracks you up with a classic one-liner or an old-school joke. It's just that the series feels like it's trying to find its groove again, and sometimes that means hitting a few wrong notes along the way. So as we close this chapter, let's remember the good times and maybe keep our expectations in check for the future. Eddsworld's journey is a reminder that even the best shows can hit a few bumps in the road. And while we might not always get the classic Eddsworld magic we remember, we can still appreciate the ride and hope for a comeback that makes us all go, "Oh yeah, that's the Eddsworld we know and love." Thanks for joining me on this roller coaster of nostalgia and critique. Until next time, keep those laughs coming, and remember, sometimes the most fun is just reminiscing about the good old days. Stay tuned, stay awesome, and as always, keep on watching.